public hearing items and issues not on the agenda. If you have something you would like to address to the Planning Commission that is not on the agenda this evening, please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. Seeing that there is none, we will move on. Case number 16-735, Group 10 Management, 740 Center Drive Northwest, Final Area Site Plan Amendment Extension Request. The Walker Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on Wednesday, October 5th, 2016, and conditionally approved a request by applicant and prospective owner, Group 10 Management, on behalf of lot owner Kimco Green Orchard for final area site plan. Review for a new hotel containing 103 guest rooms with 13,400 square foot, 55-foot tall building. The lot is zoned CPUD, Commercial Planned Unit Development, and is located at 620 Center Drive Northwest. The applicant now seeks an extension to the effect of the final area site plan under section 94-213 of the Walker zoning ordinance before seeking a building permit for the project. Dan?
All right, thanks, Tyler. This item and the next item should not take very long. I think they're fairly simple requests. The idea behind the ordinances that prompt these requests are that we want to make sure that not too much time goes by after a specific site plan approval. Rules and regulations change, building codes change, even stormwater and zoning rules change to adapt to modern times. So we want to make sure that when a planning commission approves a plan, there isn't a significant gap in the life of the project before you start building. In this case, the hotel that is proposed by the AMC Theater, this is back in fall of 2016, so we might have two new planning commissioners since then. It was a proposed Fairfield Inn and Suites by Marriott, 103 rooms, give or take a few, because I see on their new plan they have 100 listed, 55-foot tall hotel. I think part of the complication of this site has been that it's on the outlot that is going to detach from the AMC Theater lot, so I think there's been some negotiation related to the easement and securing the site from the buyer. So I can't say it better than the design engineer for the project can, so I guess I'll leave it at that. But the design engineer is here to speak to why there's a delay. In PUD projects, you have 2 years before you have to ask for an extension, which is being done tonight. In non-PUD projects, you only have a year. So I guess without further ado, I'll say there's a motion that you will act on pending your satisfaction with the description of the request from the design engineer.
Okay, besides the extension, there was a change of location of the dumpster.
Thanks for pointing that out. Yes, there was a design edit that I think that was related to the fact that there was the original location of the dumpster made sense from a layout standpoint, but there was also a stormwater easement that had to be left in place at that location. So our engineering department took a look at that and said we really shouldn't have a structure, and I support that opinion. And so we worked with their group to review their revised idea to have the dumpster on the other side of the parking lot, which seems to work for turning movements and location.
Okay. Any questions for Dan? Scott, did you have anything to add?
Nope, no report from us.
Okay, you have anything to add?
Real briefly, Justin Mortgage, it took our client to the property a long time to secure the easement that we needed from the seller, which was ingress parking. It just took a long time, so.
Okay.
Yeah, if we could,
Any questions for Justin?
I think we're close to having a building application. So.
Otherwise, what's your pleasure?
Well, I'll make a motion. Are you ready?
Yep.
Motion for case number 16-735, final area site plan extension motion. I make a motion to approve an extension up to 1 year for the final area site plan approved for a new hotel containing 103 guest rooms within the 13,400 square foot, 55-foot tall building to allow construction to commence no later than October 5 of 2019 on the property located at 620 Center Drive Northwest. Conditions of approval. Do we need to note that there was a move of the dumpster?
That's
Or
the
all
next
of
one.
them?
That's the next motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that one.
Okay, we have a motion by Jason. Is there support?
Support. Either one.
Support by Mark. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, second one, final area site plan amendment motion. I make a motion to approve the requested dumpster relocation on the property located at 620 Center Drive Northwest.
Okay, we have a motion by Jason. Is there support? Support by Elena. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on, case number 17-775, Gerald R. Ford Council, Boy Scouts of America, Special Exception Use Permit, Site Plan Extension Request. Approval was granted to the Gerald R. Ford Council, Boy Scouts of America for a special exception use permit and site plan approval to allow upgrades of an existing roughly 16,500 square foot building and site improvements including a stage, walkways, a yurt campground, an overlook deck, a climbing tower, and a variety of accessory educational and recreational buildings at a regular planning commission meeting held on October 4th, 2017. Dan?
Okay, thanks, Tyler. Similar concept, different circumstances. There's no real estate side of this one, I don't believe. I think they're just working through different aspects of permitting, and working through the fact that they're in a floodplain, and they're working on the removal of the billboard, or the alterations that we talked about last year. So they're working on their final plans, and they similarly request an extension to their approval, and I support a recommendation to extend based on what they've provided. So maybe the Boy Scouts officials can fill in some of the gaps.
Okay, somebody here representing the Boy Scouts, or just want to briefly?
Hi, Aaron Gatch with Boy Scouts of America.
And I'm Steve Tietzman with Progressive AE.
So, very close, actually, all the docs are in order. We just did have a little bit of a delay in getting the billboard totally removed from the property, and the new permits are all filed, and we're working with them, so everything is right there, and you should, pending the approval, see the site plan documents submitted for review very, very soon.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you. Questions or comments? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion. There's two motions here.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion. Motion for case number 17-775, extension, a special exemption permit extension motion. I make a motion to approve an extension of up to 1 year for the approved special exemption use permit for campus improvements to be located at 3213 Walker Avenue Northwest, 2524 Northridge Drive Northwest, and 2720 Northridge Drive Northwest, to allow construction to commence no later than October 4, 2019.
Okay, we have a motion by Jason. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Steve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passed.
Second part, site plan motion. I make a motion to approve an extension of up to 1 year for the approved site plan for campus improvements to be located at 3213 Walker Avenue Northwest, 2524 Northridge Drive Northwest, and 2720 Northridge Drive Northwest, to allow construction to commence no later than October 4, 2019.
Okay, we have a motion by Jason. Support? Support by Elena. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Thank you. Case number 17-784, Central Elementary School Phase 2 improvements, courtesy site plan review. The Walker Planning Commission will discuss 3 additions to Kennewa Hills Public Schools Central Elementary School with a total area of roughly 5,160 square feet. The affected properties are located at 4252 3 Mile Road Northwest, zoned AA Agriculture, and 2733 Nolan Avenue Northwest, zoned A2 two-family residential. Dan?
Thanks for the intro here. This is we're shifting gears into a courtesy site plan review. This is a public school. You looked at a lot broader and more extensive of campus improvements earlier in the year. And in fact, this image is a little bit outdated on that front. We now have a connection out to Nolan, the site expansion up in the front with the separation of the 2 parking areas, I think, is nearing completion. And we have Sam Wilhite from Kennewa Hills Public Schools here to talk about these additional add-on classrooms, which to my understanding are just there to help provide more capacity and help consolidate some of the other classes at the school. So these are just the 3 small additions around the perimeter of the building. And I really don't have any new site plan comments. The parking rules are still driven by the rules of the state superintendent, as are other zoning regulations. So the main local impact that we have here is continues to be stormwater, soil erosion, and driveway permitting. So, if you have any questions for Mr. Wilhite?
Scott, you have anything to add?
No, I think this is really just a continuation of the work that was already done out there. And the changes were really significant and I think a huge safety benefit.
Okay. Applicant? Please state your name for the record.
Sam Wiltice, Director of Operations.
Oh, hi, Sam.
Pardon me?
Remember me? I worked for you 30 years ago. Yeah, I did.
Hope it was all good.
Adventures here, let's go.
No, we're Cornerstone College.
I thought that was detention work study.
Cornerstone was around then?
What?
Cornerstone was around then? I just-
No, it was Grand Rapids Baptist College
Yeah, I
way
was
back
gonna
then.
Mark wanted to know, are you sure it wasn't detention work study?
Yeah, what we're doing is taking the school from an intermediate school and turning it into elementary school. So internally, we're gonna take 4 classrooms and we're gonna make them into 3. And by doing this, we need to keep the number of classrooms, we need to do these small additions just to keep the number of classrooms to meet the needs of the students.
Okay, any questions for Sam? It's good to see you. Any comments or questions? Okay, no motion on that one. So we move on. Oh, we're flying tonight.
Why? You jinx us.
Case number 18-814, West Michigan Academy of Environmental Science, Early Childhood Center, courtesy site plan review. Applicant, owner, West Michigan Academy of Environmental Science, has applied seeking site plan review for roughly 8,872 square feet, addition containing 6 classrooms and an office area to be used as an early childhood education center, along with related site improvements. Subject lot is located at 4463 Leonard Street Northwest. The lot is currently zoned AA agriculture and roughly 56.3 acres. Mr. Power?
Thanks, Tyler. So I gave the spiel the first time Central Elementary School came in earlier in the year, and I didn't just now when they came back, but here's another opportunity for a refresher. Public schools and schools that are publicly funded as public charter schools or public academies are exempt from being required to adhere to local zoning and site plan and building purview. So in other words, the state superintendent of schools delegates the responsibility for building permitting and site work, and that's different from a private academy or a private school. So it's can be a little bit complicated, but the West Michigan Academy has gone through this process before where there's no local authority for site plan review to place conditions on the site related specifically to zoning. But there is the purview of our engineering department in facilitating local stormwater and soil erosion permits, driveway permits on local roads, or in the case of the M-Roads, MDOT driveway permits. So there's a lot of involvement and coordination at the local level, especially on a site like this that has a busy M-Road. And so that's kind of the way that this is being framed up, is that we want to go through the motions and talk about what's pertinent, especially things that relate to basic life safety issues. So by and large, the addition, I see the West Michigan Academy folks behind the screen here, so I'm kind of hidden from them, but I encourage you to invite them to talk about the project as well, but I'll just go through my understanding of it. The addition on this fairly large site is pretty small compared to what's already out there. You have a under 9,000 square foot addition for 6 early childhood center classrooms, but that does generate its own intensity and its own traffic. So we want to take a close look at that at this intersection where there's a lot of stacking and some hazardous turning movements that we've observed over the years. But here's the addition on the site plan. There's a lot of site programming at this campus. As you know, it's a very developed environmental, kind of environmental science curriculum scattered throughout the campus. So there's a garden, for example, that's going to be relocated as part of this. addition. So one of the things we focused on from staff level was circulation, and this is kind of my analysis of what's impacting circulation in the site and near the site. You have blue lines and squares on this drawing with north being up on that top left image. Blue lines representing the bus. The red arrows kind of represent the movements in and out of what I'm calling the secondary driveway. And there's yellow arrows indicating circulation inside the site. So the rapid bus plays a pretty significant role here because this is not served by public school buses, but the rapid drops off a lot of students here, and there's a lot of parental drop off and pick up at the site as well. So those are kind of just analyzed on this image. Those are the only images I have on the screen, but we try to synchronize our parking and zoning rules, but we also want to make sure that this site accommodates expanded stormwater capacity and that there's good traffic data to back up the level of increased intensity on this site, and that traffic analysis and data feeds into the improvements that occur to accommodate this use in the future. So as we have control over the driveway, especially on Leonard, and look at how our roadway on Leonard Street is impacted by increased intensity, it's incumbent on us to make sure that traffic safety is being addressed. So the applicants provided went through a full process of a full traffic impact study in 2012 with their last round of additions. And the data is now being updated. And there's some things we're working through, and Scott knows more of the technical details, but we're recalibrating the way that the traffic counts are measured on the small driveway onto Wilson, for example, because it's really meant for faculty and kind of as a secondary access, whereas it was plugged into more general numbers previously. So I think what we found is that there's more traffic circulation at the Leonard driveway that causes more stacking there. So we want to make sure we're accountable to all the things that have actually been occurring, and that the improvement is backed up by sound traffic study. So from a zoning standpoint, there's really not much to look at, but I think traffic is one of the main concerns we've had with this project, and we encourage a good conversation about it, and we'll take the recommendations you have and plug them into our next step of recommendations with the school.
Okay, any questions for Dan? Scott, you actually have a report for this one?
Yeah, finally, the reason I'm here, right? We had 3 points there in our memo. The first one is probably the most significant one, and that is, related to traffic. We've had a rough summer out there with that intersection. The study that was provided as backup was from 2012, and that caused some concern because it's quite outdated, but we did look at some of the details in there to see if we could pull anything out of benefit from there. That report looked at about 750 students, and the report spread the load of that traffic on both Wilson and Leonard. And as it finally turned out, MDOT would not permit a driveway, full-service driveway to Wilson. What they did allow, and I think it was a little bit reluctantly, was to just have a service drive there for the cafeteria, I think it is, so they could allow box trucks and things to come in. And if you look at the picture, it becomes very evident that that's kind of what they planned there. There were no parking spots. It was kind of intended for, just to get the trucks away from student drop-off and passenger vehicles. So made some sense, and certainly MDOT's decision there. I think what we're seeing is, probably somewhere less than a dozen cars parking in and out of there. I don't know that that's causing a lot of trouble. It's a small number, but it's certainly not the kind of benefit that was evaluated with that report. So right away, the levels of service in that report come into question. And I think with some of the community concerns about the intersection and about traffic and speeds on Leonard, that's not something we can really look away from. That's public health safety, and we have to make sure that that's considered. So we would recommend that they go ahead and do a new traffic study there. They have done a number of improvements out here. I can think of, 3 or 4 different expansions, and probably 3 or 4 different sets of engineers have looked at this. So it's a little bit different to compare all these together, but it's important to look at the traffic patterns, the traffic volumes, the time of drop-off and pickup, and how that relates to different peaks in the area, and make sure that's considered. The second item is more of a good news item. Travis Mabry in our office worked with the school on the potential of a school zone for the east and west traffic on Leonard, which we think is a great idea. And when we do that, we don't like to just put up a sign that has a time anymore. And we kind of stopped doing that about 10 years ago because it's very difficult for the police to enforce. It's very difficult for a driver like us to realize, is it 8:29 or is it 8:31? Am I supposed to be going 55 or 35, you know, and it's very, very difficult. So we've gone away from that to the yellow flashing beacon, so the sign tells you when the school zone is in effect. And that's worked a lot better on 3 Mile Road in front of the charter school there. And that was essentially worked out between the traffic committee and the school here. The reason you don't see it yet is because we have the construction on Leonard, and we said, boy, it just doesn't make sense to put anything new, anything electrical in that right of way that's gonna be chaos for 6 months. So our hope is that we'll get that all worked out, probably within the next month, and I don't know if it would be installed this year, but it would certainly be installed by next spring. And we do have a memo, it wasn't included in the packets, but it's from January 31st of 2018 from the school that confirms that. So they're willing to pay for it. They pay to have it installed, then we take it over into the city's maintenance, and we take care of that forever, essentially. So that's in the works. Some other things that were recommended by the traffic committee that are worth noting. We had recommended that sidewalk be put on Leonard Street in front of this frontage. For obvious reasons, there's a lot of kids using the rapid bus system to get there. Pretty much every time this site is expanded, we make that recommendation, and I think last time they came in and said, how about if we build it on Wilson? To which we said, you know, sidewalk on Wilson's better than no sidewalk, so that sounds great. But I think on Leonard, as this expands, and you look at their 2 front doors, that makes a lot of sense too, and it's something for you folks to consider. And the third item is just related to stormwater. I think there's probably a very small incremental increase here, but that does not mean it's insignificant, and they'll have to provide some addition to that detention pond if it doesn't have the additional capacity. That should be very easy to do, and that'll be required as part of the stormwater permit. And that's it for us.
Any questions for Scott?
So, if I could, in your memo, I didn't see the notation on the sidewalk.
Right.
Okay, but that's part of your report, is that would be a recommended improvement along.
I think as I went back through the old traffic committee minutes, they're only a year old, that popped into my head again, because it was one of the things the traffic committee talked about. So I just think it would be really important to consider doing that, and we continue to push for that, but I'm not sure that we can require it. We're kind of dancing around the public health safety issue here. You know, some would say we could require it. The schools generally say you can't require it, but I know Kennewa, who was just here before, we worked with them on a collaboration on Nolan that was a great improvement to build that sidewalk from the new bus drop-off out to 3 Mile Road and to connect that whole network. And so we try to do that, and that's where I thought I better at least mention it here, even though it wasn't written in my report.
Yeah, it makes sense because we're gonna require the other side corner where Visser's doing, we're gonna require sidewalks all around that
Right.
corner, so why not for
It would be a nice addition, but like you said, how much can we push it? Any other questions for Scott? Otherwise, if representative for the applicant would come up, state your name for the record, please.
Yes, I'm David Mayville with the BMA Architects. Our firm was contracted to do the drawings. I do have civil engineering here with ENG that can help answer some questions. And Dan has done a great job helping us out here. He did a great job explaining this to you as well. The big question here is the study. So we acknowledge we have an old study. We acknowledge there's multiple improvements that happen at the site and some different occupancy numbers. So we are in that process of getting that proposal moving forward. In fact, we received a proposal today to do that. So I think 3 different firms we're talking to, and one of them, it's gonna come down to who can get in there after this construction finishes at that intersection and get those traffic counts when we need them. So that is moving forward. The school zone, which you had mentioned, that is moving forward as well. The owner had already agreed to that. The stormwater, I think the increase was pretty minimal. We have those improvements already on the drawings. And again, Dan did a great job explaining this process. This is a courtesy review, but there's a lot of elements in here. And I tend to use this word, when I turn this into the state, I have to get your sign off, so you guys kind of have veto power on a lot of this stuff, so. But as far as what we need sign off for the state, and we do want to get this submitted, in fact, I'll submit this tomorrow, after this meeting. I think we met all of those requirements. There's kind of a checklist with some sign offs, so I'm hoping we can get some direction here, that I can get something uploaded to the state pending this traffic study that's coming out. One comment, you mentioned a sidewalk, so are you looking to get that as part of our improvements on this site plan?
Yeah, I think we continue to recommend that you guys build the sidewalk, just like any other developer would have to, on your frontage,
Can you show us exactly where that sidewalk?
on Leonard. So it's pretty open, you can build it in the right-of-way at the proper location, which is 1 foot off the right-of-way, or you can build it on your site and meander it back and forth through trees. We're very flexible about that. The idea is just to make sure that the frontage is covered with that sidewalk.
Okay, so I'm sure we can do that with the owner before we leave tonight.
We view that as kind of a safety issue too, especially around a school, to keep the kids off the side of the road, so.
So in a nutshell, we have this study, we're gonna try to get it done as fast as we can. The owner has also been looking at options with busing and use of public transportation to try to limit some of the times. Do you wanna elaborate on a little of that information on?
State your name for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Carrie Barrett. I'm the elementary principal at West Michigan Academy of Environmental Science. And what he's talking about is with the new addition, talking about staggered start times. We did that this year with our growth just internally with enrollment. We went to a little bit later start times for the secondary. So the elementary starts first and the secondary starts 15 minutes after. And we've seen improvements in our parking lot for that, so they get out later as well. So that's improved the traffic internally on our site. That's really helped, and so that's what that's what we'd like to do with this addition as well, with adding that classroom, is doing staggered start times with that. So using the traffic study to kind of understand where the time should be and how far they should be. And then another option that our board is open to looking at is not necessarily busing, but having certain spots around the city that people can meet, get on a bus and bring, so there's less cars coming in through the intersection. That would take a little bit more in terms of a bus, but staggered start time could be a commitment that could easily be solved quickly, so.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
With regard to the student population right now, is it right around 750 right now, or what is the level?
Currently, we have 850 students total in pre-K through 12.
Okay. And with the addition, how many additional students are anticipated, or is it just going to be maintaining the same capacity?
Yeah, we anticipate adding, the goal is at least to add 48 families, because we would be adding two preschool classrooms with 24 in it each. But then we're also, we already have 2 preschool classrooms too, just to kind of give you an idea about the addition. So we'd be moving them out, and it gives us more flexibility in our space to use with the students we currently have.
You mentioned, I've seen the charter school as far as a drop-off and pickup, and it's quite an operation. As it currently operates, are there times where it is approaching back up onto Leonard, or is that kept pretty much in check?
It's for the most part kept in check. If it does get that way, we have staff that work out in the parking lot every day that are designated visually with vests, and they're very known amongst the parents. So if that is ever the case, we have someone out there to be moving traffic and moving them into the parking lot, even if they have to go around and internally go loop around the parking lot that you guys can see. There's space in there that can be done. And so they're there to ensure that that's happening. But we have staggered dismissal times for our elementary and secondary, as well as internal programming that creates more staggered times.
That sounds like it's a good
plan.
technique to address that.
Yeah.
In terms of the number of students that come in on the Rapid, Do you have a sense on how many that might be?
I don't know. Elementary, for pre-K 5, we don't have very many, and if they are coming off the rapid, it's with their families. I know of 4 families in the elementary that were together, but
Okay.
the secondary students are more so taking the rapid on their own. This is Alan Bosker, he's the secondary principal.
Thank you. I would anticipate we have probably 40 to 50 students school-wide, including your own families. They all big brothers and sisters who are at the rapid every day.
So you got some built-in chaperones in effect in that. In terms of that, what is the route that they generally take to get into the site and exit the site to get back to the bus stop?
So we have a bus stop right on site, right off Wilson, right there, so the kids don't, we have an internal sidewalk, so they just walk right up the bus route, and that takes them up to Myers, which is typically go which direction you're gonna go.
But there's a stop, though, near,
On Leonard Street.
on Leonard Street, just east of Wilson. Is that used for outgoing movements, or?
We discourage it. We do have a crossing guard that would usher people over there, but we discourage it. We just encourage them to stay right on campus right there.
So predominantly, they do stay on the campus and use that bus stop there for ingress and
Once in a
egress?
while they do.
Okay. All right.
Other questions? Do they address your
Well, the
concern?
elephant in the room is the sidewalk.
Yeah, for the sidewalk on the front of, the school, it's been addressed with our board, and they've discussed taking on the cost of doing that sidewalk. The decision, I think it was recently discussed when we talked about the beacons, they didn't move forward with that sidewalk, but they did, state that they were gonna revisit it and keep looking at it. We, like Mr. Bosker said, we highly encourage our students, if they're on that side, they go on the sidewalk and then they go up to the grass to the school. But mainly, because students are using the rapid bus stop and using our back entrance on our connector, and we have a sidewalk there for them that they follow. So the main path is there.
I don't think I'm supposed to do this, but what if I throw out an idea? Some kind of a compromise whereby the sidewalk could be built from the intersection west to the first driveway. I mean, that's where the pedestrian activity really ends. When you look towards the future to the west, the density is not gonna be that great. I mean, I don't see sidewalk going all the way to 8th Avenue or anything for quite some time. But, getting that first piece might be a nice compromise.
Well, we can suggest it,
Gather the
but
pedestrians a little bit more when they have, nighttime events and things like all schools have to have.
Would you have it exit onto, to Wilson? Because, in a couple of years, we're gonna have a sidewalk on the other side that could connect.
Yeah, well, we'll have pedestrian crossings and things there, but, I think the other part is that if there's like an evening activity or something like that, and people are just parked all over the place, we've all been to
Yeah.
elementary schools like that. I can see where some folks might park across the street at the doctor's offices too, and I think just having that there to kind of gather them up makes a good compromise. So as Tom said, if that's the elephant in the room, then maybe that's the circus to gather that up, to just have some sidewalk.
we keep getting more people here.
My name's Stan Rath, and I serve as the board liaison for the school, and we've talked about that sidewalk before, and it was right on the verge of doing it, we're just in a complex building mode at that time. I think we'd be very open to that.
That helps us with the school zone, I think, too, because the state law would frown a little bit on having a school zone without a sidewalk, because the whole idea is it's there for children to walk to school. It's not there to slow traffic for other traffic. So I think that would help us to support putting that in as well.
Yeah.
Oh, we would suggest that, which is what we're limited to do on this one.
I heard we have
Well,
veto- we have veto
I guess
power.
I would like to hear a commitment. I heard a gentleman say he's in a hurry to get this,
He's got to take it back to the board, and there's got to be a board commitment vote, so he can only relay it back.
Cost is what. Well, I can't make a commitment on behalf of the board, but I can take it back and once we get a price fixed to it, because they want to know that, they could make a decision.
To Patrick's question and our typical practice, in the future, there may be development across the street in Wilson, across Wilson, and I think typically we would have the flares to both intersections, and then maybe that's part of the question. So I think that's something we should probably clarify, if that's something we'd require here, and if that has an impact on the scope of the work.
Flares, you mean the,
Handicap
You
ramps.
lost me.
Handicap ramps, yeah, ADA
Flares on
ramps.
Leonard and.
Oh, you have,
And
you
Wilson.
mean ADA ramps?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
well,
On both.
you
They're
have
doing
to
the
put them
sidewalk,
in.
I don't know why they wouldn't do that.
yeah, why wouldn't they
Can't
build it to spec?
If you do it, you have to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, any other questions or comments? You satisfied with this traffic study coming?
That's up to you folks. I mean, it's, the tough question is, the veto power, I guess. Do we, when the state calls us up and says, hey, you guys all good? I mean, what we have to say is, what you guys want, I guess, is, do you wanna have the traffic study? Do you wanna have that to be some kind of a condition? What if the traffic study comes back and the whole intersection's blown up, you know, everything's level of service F? Then what happens? That's the real
Well,
concern,
then-
I guess.
Yeah,
So-
then we start talking about bigger staggered times and
Yeah, I
stuff
think
like that, I mean.
the things that they've said are awesome, and other schools have said, no, I'm not doing that. So, very innovative to be considering it. You know, North Wilson Commerce Park's the first thing that popped into my head as an example. When they had terrible traffic congestion on their one way in and out, a lot of the businesses in there staggered their times, and it came down to be more reasonable. And I think that could work here too. But I don't know what that trigger would be when the study comes in. You know, is there some kind of a collaboration on a development agreement to help pay for traffic signal upgrade? I think the one thing that the commission keeps talking about is, when can we have left turn phases on Leonard? And it's, you know, it's close, but it doesn't meet the threshold yet. Well, stuff like this helps to make it meet the threshold.
Well, I
So
would
I don't
bring
know
up-
how that would be implemented.
I would bring up across the street where Vista's gonna be building houses and everything, that'll affect that intersection also, and so, I mean, we can't just put it all on one certain landowner to improve the whole intersection.
I think that's why I use the word collaboration, because
Yeah.
it would have to be a collaboration.
I think the most significant thing that's been shared this evening is the fact that they are staggering already.
Yeah.
And they recognize the impacts that are on the surrounding, street system. So I don't know that the traffic study is necessarily, we have to wait to that, because they're already doing that. And, if they proceed and adjust, and if their analysis does get down to that type of detail where they can advise, how to change those intervals to minimize or eliminate any backup onto the street, that's gonna be key.
Yeah, I think they're doing a good effort, and, I don't know that the traffic study will,
I'm not a traffic engineer, but what did the first study say in detail? I mean, I think it said, it kind of works now.
It said, don't worry about it, essentially, right? I mean, it said, everything's gonna be fine, we're gonna diffuse the traffic, level of service will be pretty good everywhere. That's where I wonder, your comment kind of leads almost to a condition that, you know, maybe the addition will not cause a decrease in level of service. You know, and they can adjust that with staggered times, something like that.
Yeah.
That's the best way to get out of having to pay for any improvements.
Well, obviously, it's to their advantage to do those kind of things before paying for improvements, and I'm sure they would. But by the same token, we come back to public safety, health, and welfare, and to just say, yeah, this looks pretty good, and we hope all things work out well. That's not the location to hope that all things work out well. And I guess I'm a little disappointed about the sidewalk, because this isn't a surprise that we've talked about sidewalk, or the city's talked about sidewalk, so you can come here and say, well, gosh, we gotta figure out how much it's gonna cost, but it's not a surprise. I'm gonna be the grumpy old man tonight. So.
what's new? Okay, I would say that I think it's a consensus that a traffic study a good idea. Regardless, I think it needs to be done to prove to yourselves that you may have to change things a little bit. And I think that's you may want to share it with, staff once you get it and just talk it over with them, I think, to make us more comfortable with the whole thing. Otherwise, personally, I don't feel they can't move forward with what they want. I sure would recommend the sidewalk. That's a safety thing.
If nothing else, at least to the first drive.
Yeah. So,
Especially knowing that across the street, there's been a lot of talks about quite a bit of housing going in there too, which would probably increase the amount of students that you would gain. And then you do have kids that are walking across Wilson.
yeah, that's, I mean, we're not talking the next year or so, but it's planned already. So, lots of houses.
I think Scott's suggestion as far as if we're gonna do anything with regard to the, traffic study is that there'd be a trigger at which point, they would modify those, intervals in order to, avoid a level of service. What is
The trigger?
Decrease. You could say, what is it today? We know it's kind of bad now, so we're not gonna let it get any worse in terms of your letter grade for the intersection. That's great for school. Everybody understands A through F, right? But you could just say, nothing worse than level of service D or E. I mean, you could pick a number too.
Well, how about if the study shows that there's gonna be a negative impact, that you need to come back to the staff and say, hey, we gotta work this out. You can move forward with your plans, get your building addition going on, but you need to address the negative impacts, if there are any, from your, plus I would assume if you're doing this traffic study, you're gonna plug your staggered times and all that in there. And if it comes back and says, hey, we're looking good, you won't come to see us again. But
Well, I'm assuming the study is a collaboration. I mean, it costs quite a bit of money to do these things. We're sharing some numbers for this. And as they're coming back and giving us information, we're gonna respond and say, okay, what happens when we adjust these things? And these guys have these algorithms and they push it all in these programs. So my gut is the study, we're gonna do what it takes to make the study work for the intersection. But you also have to remember that, this is a big site, and these guys are growing. So it's, we're talking 5-10 years from now, we're just gonna have more population.
You're saying it's getting worse.
Right, so, yeah.
Well, and Wilson,
But we get critiqued when things get bad and we've not done good planning, so.
And when you have fatalities at intersections, understood.
yeah,
A lot of accidents
Well,
there.
we've been yelled at before.
I just say, we want to be good citizens, of the city of Walker. We want to do what's right, we want to make that intersection safe. And so we're going to be very responsive to what the traffic study does. We have internal ways that we've already discussed on ways to mitigate, that traffic flow. Besides the input we're getting here, believe me, if we have backups, our parents are going to let us know. And there's only so much patience that they have before they choose to move on with their own feet, okay? So we're going to be, if we get backups and not a good traffic flow, we're going to hear it probably from you all, but we're going to hear it immediately from our parents also. Yeah, it'll self-regulate itself, because I've worked with several schools that have been in this position, and if it didn't get regulated, parents just choose to move on and then self-regulate.
Okay,
But you have a lot of land and I'm assuming you're planning on growing and you're gonna have to deal with the traffic issue, so.
Just to respond to that, the board through, for several years now is, they have the opportunity to grow. They could grow to 1,600 students probably because the demand is there. But what they've discussed, and the board has put this in the strategic plan, they want the school to remain at a family size. So they determined that number to be in that 900 to 1,000 student category. So at that point, everything's geared towards that. I can't speak for future boards 10 years down the road, but right now, this board, that's their commitment. That's where they're capping.
interesting.
One more staff recommendation, I guess, to help you out is maybe when you're looking at those three proposals, don't just pick the cheapest one. Pick the one that you trust the most and try to build a relationship with that firm so you can have them come back for the next few expansions, and then you can really build a knowledge base there that they can stand behind and really help you out. Because I think if you continue to switch and look around, you'll find somebody that'll tell you, yes, everything's fine, but we want to make sure that it's safe for everybody.
Okay, what else do you need from us, Dan?
No action, we'll take these recommendations and run with them. There still needs to be a stormwater permitting and a soil
Well, yeah, of
erosion
course.
end. But other than that, I want to commend everybody here for talking about sidewalks, because I know it also wasn't in my report, and I think that's a really important thing we fleshed out, and I appreciate the conversation about that. I know it's kind of a miss on my part.
My
So,
part.
We got you covered.
important. I'm glad to see.
Okay, any questions from you?
If you come back a second time and I'm still on the board, I'll be grumpier yet if there's no sidewalk.
I don't think that's possible, but. Okay, thank you. Just joking, Tom. Okay, where are we at here?
Okay, neighbor.
Where are we at? Oh, Cummings. Case number 18-812, RGM Cummings, Standale Townhome, Live Work Development, 349 Cummings Avenue Northwest. Site plan review tabled from October 3rd. Applicant 349 Cummings LLC on behalf of owner Gerald F. Belts seek site plan review for Phase 1 improvements on the 1.2 acre lot located at 349 Cummings Avenue, which is zoned at Standale Downtown District. The proposal includes 12 multiple-family residential units in three-story buildings with a total footprint area of 7,212 square feet, along with parking, stormwater improvements, landscaping, and layout for future Phase 2 improvements, including two-unit 2080 square foot live-work building site. First of all, can I get a motion to take this off the table?
Make motion?
Motion by Steve, is there support? Support by Elena, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's off the table. Dan?
Hey, thanks Eric for your sticking around. I know you've been at the tail end of a lot of meetings lately, so this one's a little shorter. We had a really productive discussion a couple of weeks ago. The plan has come back with some reflection of what you recommended at that time, and we did our best to kind of turn around new recommendations for your review today based on this plan. Really nothing from a underground aspect has changed. I don't think there's anything utility related or grading related that has really changed based on what's been done on this site plan. But the main theme that we were trying to accomplish was, first and foremost, the planning commission accepted overall the layout concept. I know there was kind of a fundamental discussion and dialogue about different layout options and kind of a courtyard design, kind of turned inside and forward rather than this design, which is a little bit more linear. And what we came back with was, this is kind of an unconventional site. You're gonna have kind of a front focal point that's gonna be that live work building that really ties you to Cummings Street frontage. So the townhomes can really function on their own and don't have to meet as much of the frontage-based standards of the Standale code. So this layout with two buildings, linear, is acceptable, but we wanted to make sure that these buildings tied into what was going on out front and zooming outside of the site to what was going to happen with a eventual grid, kind of a potential street network in the future, whether it's just the driveway coming from the future apartment complex or whether there's other development that this connects to. You really shouldn't see that south wall or that south edge of the site be kind of blocked off. It should be something that opens up to the rest of the access network. So here's what we ended up with. There's a picnic area and a sidewalk connection on that end of the building, and there's been some architectural treatment on that end of the building as well. So your architectural renderings are basically the same. There's been a little bit of adjustment to add some windows, some window slats on the bottom of these walls. Here's the facade from the south. Is that right, Eric? This one is the side facade viewing towards the southernmost building. From the sides. So to get back into orientation, I think I just want to go through expanding on the discussion of orienting the site that we had last time, because I know there was some talk about how does this tie into kind of the physical plan of the future grid that was envisioned with the master plan in 2007. And so I wanted to show a little bit more of that. So here we have the potential future driveway, presuming the Westtown project proceeds according to plan. This drawing doesn't show anything in great detail, but it shows you basically the layout of this site on the two buildings on the left here, connected to that kind of parking and the small shop to the north, and then the brew pub to the north. And that's how this site lays out in relation to the future Westtown project back closer to Wilson. But then you also look at the master planning intent. So when, I'm not sure who was here at that time, but back in '07 when the Standale subplan was developed, there was this idea that there would be a transition of uses, really pedestrian in scale and common areas and shared uses. When the rubber meets the road, is that practical in all locations? No. There are some sites that just aren't gonna develop that way. Some sites that, even that have been recently approved, like the car wash, the parcel configuration of some of these sites just isn't gonna lend to this form. But here's what we have now on the top of the screen on the top of the screen was the master plan, physical plan, and on the bottom of the screen is what we have now pending. And then you get into the analysis. This is the same scale, top and bottom. So instead of having these frontage buildings, maybe those sites will turn over time. You know, I don't see that drive-through form going away as quickly as maybe we'd like to see in Standale. But this is what was envisioned, and this is the reality on the bottom. So trying to be creative about thinking about how that form could be met. You can see some recurring themes, so making sure there is connectivity between the different use types, whether that's just sidewalks or shared parking and kind of commons areas. You can recreate some of that with this site. I think that's what we're really trying to go for, is making sure that these different uses, in terms of between the front building and the rear buildings, and between the entire site and the broader access network and some of the other amenities to the west, how can we accomplish that? So this is a leftover image of the old layout. But as long as we're accomplishing these goals with the new site plan, I think we've met more of the intent than we saw a couple of weeks ago with kind of an isolated site. So having that sidewalk connectivity to the front and having a little bit of dressing up and landscaping to kind of daylight that southern wall of the Southern Townhome building. That was my takeaway from what you were looking for this time around. So I'm gonna skip forward a bunch of slides here, and we can always go back, but these are the things that we're still deviating from in the code, are in the bright yellow here. The things that I think have been satisfactorily addressed with the new submittal is the provision of open space, common open space with actual amenities. You're still not gonna have front entrances that face the public street. You're still not gonna have the front porches, the 3-foot rise and finished floor elevation. Facades may still be a little bit under the 15%. I think my report has, the calculation went from something like 12 to 13. But I think a lot of that is because of the garage doors. I'm considering those not counted as doors or windows, so that ticks down the percentage quite a bit. But if you look at the materiality of the buildings, my interpretation, that's one thing that I think can have some leniency, because there's a pretty interesting mix of materials in those buildings. The other things are just a function of the buildings being perpendicular to the street rather than parallel to the street. I'd encourage you to go through all these deviations, and where you think you can justify them, the motion sheet is set up for you to be able to do so. I think by and large, as long as there is a phase 2 review that you have your fingers on later, maybe it's like within the next year. I mean, it should be within the next year. If it's not, they'll come back anyway. But hopefully sooner than later, and you'll have another opportunity to give a really close look at how that building relates to Cummings frontage. So with that said, assuming that, and with the way these buildings are laid out now, I think you can come pretty close to justifying the deviations that are being sought, and that the overall site will, assuming that phase 1 and 2 meet the code overall, the site will enhance the public interest. will not detract from the overall intent of Standale, which is to make a downtown pedestrian-oriented environment. There will be a pedestrian-oriented downtown that the project will link to and complement nearby neighborhoods and connect to a core downtown area. And kind of a similar theme with your architectural points of leniency and findings of fact. So all I'm asking is that you use the model motion. I didn't put on the slides my recommended conditions, but I'm glad to, I'll summarize those right now. And I'm glad to talk about those more. We might have brushed past those the first time around because we were focused on more fundamental aspects of the site. But my conditions are the boilerplate, making sure that the final permit drawings are submitted, the city engineer's comments are adopted. The phase 2 portion of the project comes back for a full review, that you folks go through all the findings of fact closely in your motion sheet. That the easements that are identified on the plans are recorded, and that includes the potential future connection to the driveway to the south and the bilateral parking cross-access shared driveway with the brew pub site to the north. Eventually, we will need condominium documents reviewed by the city attorney if this is gonna be developed as a condo. We want to make sure that that's all squared away and formally recorded. If there is any impact on the wetlands, we need MDEQ to be involved as well. But that looks like that won't come into play until there is a future connection to that driveway to the south. So with that, I'm glad to talk about my conditions and comments, but otherwise you can just rely on the new drawings you have and the motion sheet.
Questions or comments for Dan?
Just a clarification, there's no time limit on phase 2 when that takes place?
I didn't recommend one, but it is on this plan, so I think maybe in coordination with hearing from the developer and when they plan to get that going, we've heard a pretty short time horizon, so it'd probably be reasonable to ask for that to be initiated in the next year, just based on the conversations we've had. But I didn't put a specific timeline in my report.
Other questions? Otherwise, Scott?
No new report from us.
Okay. If the applicant wants to come forward and field questions, if there are any, state your name for the record, please.
Eric Jones with Argent Properties.
One year or 2 years?
When we first started that, we planned on building it right away, but twofold, we decided to do it in 2 phases. One being logistical, having that shared easement as the eventual access, we didn't feel that would be a good route to have construction traffic coming through. So we actually will end up where that phase 2 is gonna be putting in a temporary service drive for construction to keep traffic away from the shared easement of the, I don't know the name of the Moon Drop, I believe it is. So to keep it off that, and then the other portion is economical. We feel it'll be better that once we get our building done, in approximately 8 months from now, that'll also have the fact that West Town will be coming in. That's our reason.
1 year or 2 years?
And also the fact of, we plan on it rolling into the next phase as soon as phase 1 is done.
So you're all comfortable with the 1 year, or you'll be back to renew us?
Yep.
Okay.
You do realize, like we stated in our previous meeting, phase 2 will probably have to adhere really close to the STD standards. Yeah, I'm just warning you now, because I don't think there's one of us that would say different.
We don't expect any leniency or deviation from the code on that.
I just want to be perfectly clear.
I will say, except there is the underlying understanding that the consumer's easement imposes some limits on that. What you'd like to see is a closer build-to line.
Build to.
Bring the building closer to the sidewalk. That's not gonna be possible.
No, of course not, where an easement is. I'm talking the 12-foot and the 3-foot and the front porch and all that nifty stuff.
Yeah, there's different architectural standards that apply to those mixed-use types of buildings, but it's the same concept of
Yeah.
a kind of a raised protrude first floor. Yep.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
I like the south exposure treatment, it looks very nice.
Thank you.
Breaks it up, I think, very nicely for a second front door or front yard.
Was there any thought on the mailboxes?
Those actually came up
Yeah.
today, I don't know if you wanna comment on that, and then I will.
I can comment on it. I have it sitting in my inbox on an email. I don't have that unless it's on this plan and just not highlighted, but I think I can point based on my memory. It's not always great. Point to where you guys showed it being, which is, kind of in this zone here, and that is landscaped right now, so there'd have to be some adjustment of the landscape.
There'd be adjustment to that, yeah.
So
So
right
like
by,
that, to coordinate with the post office, they, a lot of times they come and tell us where they wanna have it. We try and, they don't wanna, if you want a development feature, we'd like to have the old mailbox right in front of each door and have that old fashioned style, but there's no way the post office is gonna wanna do that, they wanna stay in their vehicle.
I'd put it on the other side so you can just reach out.
Reach out.
Yeah, but then you're driving the wrong way.
So,
Yeah, the struggle with that is the new phase 2 entry, if it comes in on the back, then
Yeah.
they end up right there, so it's kind of where that first tree is, might
I
make some
can't get
sense
too
there.
excited about that. The post office and the developer will work that out, so.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, good work. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay. For case 18-812, I'll make a motion to conditionally approve the site plan specific to the property located at 349 Cummings Avenue Northwest, dated 10/10/2018, as revised, subject to the following conditions and based on the findings of fact noted below. Conditions of site plan approval, the applicant agrees to all conditions noted in the city staff planner zoning administrator's letter dated 10/11/2018. The applicant agrees to all conditions noted in the city engineer's letter dated 9/25/2018. Findings of fact from section 94-177A and 94-177A5S of the Walker zoning ordinance. Whereas the identified phase 2 portion of this project is considered unapproved and full design details regarding phase 2 will be submitted for planning commission review at a later date, and whereas the submitted phase 1 site plan does meet the intent of the Standale Downtown District zoning ordinance, including to facilitate the development of a traditional pedestrian-oriented downtown, regarding the requirement that a 12-foot minimum first-story height is provided, that buildings have a main entrance that faces the front lot line, that the building's front facades are composed of 15% windows and non-garage doors, and that the buildings have a front porch or stoop with steps. Requests for leniency from these standards are appropriate based on the findings of facts stated below. The requested deviations are consistent with the desired character of the Standale Downtown District as articulated in the city master plan, do fit within the context of adjacent or proposed buildings nearby, do maintain or enhance the continuity of the pedestrian environment. The building's roof designs do remain in character with other buildings along the block and is within the minimum and maximum height requirements of the district, subject to, what we added, right? The building's exterior finish materials do remain of equal or better quality and durability as those otherwise required in this district. At the time of the development of the phase 2 portion of the site, ground floor windows will remain along the front sidewalk to maintain the pedestrian orientation of the streetscape. Upper story windows are compatible with the rhythm and proportions of windows on other buildings along the block. Regarding the requirement that the townhome buildings have a main entrance that faces the front lot line, this request is appropriate based on the findings that this design standard deviation will enhance public interest, will not detract from the overall intent and regulatory tone of the district, will facilitate a traditional pedestrian-oriented downtown, will link the project to and complement the nearby neighborhoods, will allow the project to connect to a core downtown area.
Okay, we have a motion by Steve. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Jason. Questions or comments?
With regard to having phase two come back within a year,
No, that was to give him a year to get this project started. I thought that's what we were talking about.
okay.
If he,
Point of discussion.
if he doesn't have any activity,
If he doesn't have any activity for a year, he's got to come back
and he
anyway.
has to come, well, no, I thought that was I thought.
You're gonna knock it out in 8 months, you said, right?
We want a phase one done in 8 months, yeah.
I thought Dan said that we didn't have a time on this
On
one.
phase two, I believe Dan was
I
talking.
didn't recommend one. I thought the conversation that you had,
Oh, if you didn't recommend, okay, disregard it.
but I think what you ended up talking about was that there would be a submittal within the next year, and maybe I misunderstood that.
On phase two.
On phase two.
That's what I
Oh,
thought.
that's not what I was,
Okay.
if the project goes on, oh gosh, the economy tanked and, a year from now, they haven't broke ground yet. I thought that's what we were talking about. That's where I was going.
What's the enforcement? I mean, if they don't come back in 8 months, what can you do about it?
What?
If they don't move forward, do nothing, then they have to come back after a year, right?
Yeah, the default is the site plan would be expired after a year unless they ask for an extension, like you saw earlier.
Right.
Yeah,
So that's an automatic.
yeah, well, I thought he said that, I missed his, disregard any comment on it, because I misunderstood what Dan said.
My recommendation was that a phase two has to be done at some point, and probably good to have a time limit in there in terms of when it's submitted for review, which was a gap on my part, but I do ask that there is a second phase of review for the upfront building.
Which was already in your,
Right.
okay.
Disregard my comment.
Other questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Thank you. Case number 18-798, Michigan State Police, 2294 Mile Road Northwest, final area site plan, minor amendment request, administrative update. Applicant owner, State of Michigan, has applied for an adjustment of an approved final area site plan review for proposed consolidated laboratory district headquarters and post building with a proposed footprint of 61,175 square feet to allow a height increase to extend the height from 50 to 55. The subject lot is located at 2294 Mile Road and is roughly 16.8 acres. Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Last one, I think it's fairly simple. What we allow for in planned unit developments is that you can increase the height of your building by 10%, no questions asked. This particular case is a little complicated for two reasons. One is that it's a state facility, and so there's limited zoning authority, kind of in a different way than there was with public school, but there's still limits on what the planning commission can do. That being said, this is a request for an increase in height above an already, a point of leniency from UV benefit side of things. So it's already a 50-foot tall building, where we usually see 45. They're requesting an additional 5 feet. So what I'm trying to do is to have there be transparency and have you have the chance to weigh in on this and express any concerns or take anything back to the Michigan State Police. Understanding that our review authority is a little bit limited if we interpret this as a essential aspect of their building being a public safety facility. So what they're asking for is just to, I think based on some of the drop off in the grade and the part of the building is to have the kind of cabinet or, they call it the,
Penthouse?
penthouse, the HVAC equipment on top of the building be extended 5 feet. What I did in your packet that I don't have on this, forgot to have some graphics available for tonight, was kind of a rough line of sight drawing, my interpretation showing that there's no place that wasn't already in the view shed of the top of this building that will now be in the top of the building. what I'm gonna recommend to the state police, and I'm sure the report with them, is that there is no light in that equipment, and the equipment doesn't generate any more sound than would be allowed by our sound controls. So I think between those two things, this level of height increase is a fairly minor adjustment to PUD. If you're comfortable with that, I'll just take those recommendations back to them and work through them and bring it to the permit.
Comments for Dan? Pretty basic. That's all you needed from us, right? Okay, wow. Updates?
We're getting back into the grind in November. We got two big Walker View site plans and a plat, first phase of a plat on Richmond, which, maybe if any of you live in the second ward, you already hear rumblings about what's going on in the big farm field on Richmond across from Mullins. I know our office has heard about that site, kind of nonstop, because you always see kind of activities happening there, trees are getting cut, it's used for staging for some of the sidewalk project. But that group is, turning in their first phase plan now, so November 7th will be a pretty extensive agenda, but two sites in Walker View right next to one another, so that should be, we're working through those two sites, kind of conjointly in some ways, and so that should be pretty straightforward. The Richmond site will be, probably a more extensive discussion, but that's 3 weeks away, so enjoy your Halloween, enjoy getting bow hunting, drinking cider, voting, all the good things about.
I would urge everybody to drive through Walker View. They started a couple of those buildings out there now, or at least one, and then they put the trailer on the other one, on the east side there. It's kind of exciting to see something actually. And that state police building, how many millions of dollars? 55 million, was it, that they're putting in it?
$1 million a foot in height?
I didn't think it was that much. When we looked at it, it was
I don't know, but anyway, it's supposed to be pretty, I mean, they're consolidating three.
half that, but.
Was it half that? No.
Dan, is the Richmond project, is that public hearing that night?
It will be, yeah.
I'll be well attended.
Yeah, more fun. I'm busy that night.
Yeah, St. Tyler's going, okay, Tom, guess what?
Well, there's been some, I
Hi,
know
neighbor.
some of you were around for the first kind of really informal discussion about that site a couple of years ago, and there have been some changes to their plans. It's, as shown right now, it's a multi-phase plat project with single-family lots. So that's the proposal that they have now, and they've moved towards kind of synchronizing with us on some of the traffic recommendations and layouts.
In the 3 mile yet?
There's not a
Not in
wall
phase
separating
one.
the site from 3 Mile, I'll put it that way. So,
One of the things that I think you have to think about there is that they're claiming this is a 20 or 30-year build-out. And they've changed their mind 3 times about what they want on the back of that site. They haven't dug anything yet. So we want to keep our options open so that if it changes and they go to condos or apartments or something on the north side, it would make sense to poke that out to 3 Mile, consistent with Royal Vista condominiums, Indian Mill Creek condominiums.
Who's the
Those places
engineer?
would make sense. Naderveld.
They argued totally against that when they were here last time, punching it through. But
But I think if it stayed all single-family residential, I think the group had said last time that they wouldn't be as crazy about a connection there. But you can bring that up again, it's open topic.
Well, the public will bring it up. At least 25 of them.
okay, any other questions or any more comments?
Well, if they want to keep it a cornfield, they need to take a collection.
I know. It's-
Otherwise, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
It's the end or the
doing?
Complete?
complete, there you go.
I'm fine, why?